Back to my channel, Learn at Cloud Analytics. So today we will be looking at how do we calculate rolling 12 months average sales within that particular table. Okay. So before we even get into the details of how do we calculate this particular requirement, let's first understand why and what is the need of using this rolling 12 months calculation. So rolling 12-month or moving average is nothing but it is a simply a series of 12-month averages over multiple consecutive 12-month period. So this would allow us to smooth out the effects of month to month changes. So we can use a 12-month rolling average in order to analyze any type of monthly numbers such as revenues, profits, stock prices or even account balances. So, the perfect example where we can apply this sort of a requirement would be that in a stock price or in a stock market, right, where the data has been updated on every second basis. So, it's quite important that if we are seeing a lot of fluctuations over that given period, it's quite it's not so easy for us to make out where are the dips and increase or the spikes in that particular trend. So that is where we would allow us to use this rolling 12 months calculation applied at that particular scenario, so that it is helpful and easier for us to look at how the trend has been looking at for that particular data. So now let's get into the discussion and understand how we can achieve this particular requirement with a calculation. So here I've already created one calculation which is doing what is needed here. But let's do this from the beginning. So I'll just remove this calculation and try to apply it and create it from the beginning. So, in order to create this particular calculation, first we would like to chunk out, or probably we'd like to bifurcate where and what is exactly needed to calculate this. Because it's a pretty lengthier calculation, I would like to give, or I would like to chunk out the pieces of calculation, like how we are supposed to look at and how we can implement it step by step in the process. So, the first step that we would need to understand here is that we would need to first calculate the average and then make it as a moving average. So, in order to do that, we have the sales amount spread across the months in a year, as you see in this particular table. And now we would need to calculate the monthly average on top of the sales amount. So, now let's try to create this basic calculation. So I will just go here and create a new measure, and then I call this as maybe as a sales average, and then I'll hit on the next line, and here I would use a function called average x because I would like to apply this average being computed across or on the entire table. So therefore I'm using this iterative function average x, where we are supposed to parse two parameters. So the first parameter here, as you can see here, is, let me try to increase the font size. Okay, so I think now it is visible. So here the two parameters that we are supposed to insert here is the table followed by the expression. Okay, so now let's try to add that values here. So I'm going to use another function called values, and within my date table, I would like to use this calendar year month number field, and based on my sales amount. Okay, and then I'll hit on apply. So what are we trying to achieve in this particular calculation is we are simply trying to calculate the average on my sales amount spread across the year. So now let's try to add this particular calculation onto this particular matrix and see how the values have been populated. So I will just select this particular um, okay, let me first select this here. So now let me add the sales average. Now if you observe here, The average value has been shown at the year level, but on the month level, it is still the same numbers. See, for every month, it is giving us the same result. So for Jan, it's the same, and also for the other months, right? Now, here the average is same for all the months, and average is happening at the year level. So therefore, what are we supposed to do here? We would like to apply or add this calculation at every month, because we are trying to achieve or trying to calculate the rolling average for the 12-month period. We would like to do this on the month level. So in order to do that, what are we supposed to do here? So we need to extend this particular filter context of every month to include a moving average of the last 12 months, or whatever the period that we are looking at to calculate. Okay, so in order to achieve this particular requirement, there is a specific function within Power BI or within DAX that would help us to extend the filter context to include a longer period, which is dates in period. So dates in period returns a set of dates in a given period, and we need to specify that particular period. So, in order to specify that period, we would require a reference date, so that the starting point of the period and then the duration of the period. So, these are the two uh, requirements that is needed in order to consider this particular expression or that particular function. So, let's try to see the syntax of it before we update that particular calculation. So, I'll just say dates and period. So as you see here, so it would return the dates from the given period. And what are the parameters that are supposed to be considered here? So it requires a reference date, and then we require the starting point of the period and the duration of that particular period. Okay, so here in this particular scenario, since we require this to be applied at a 12-month rolling average, that particular interval would be 12 months. Okay, and we also need to specify at what level do we like to calculate this particular function. So the interval is nothing but, let's say that in this scenario we are trying to calculate the rolling average on a month level, right? So therefore the interval would be or would need to be provided as a month. Okay, so maybe let's try to create or update that calculation, and then we will try to understand how this can be achieved. Okay, so I'll just take the same calculation here. Sorry. So here, uh, since this average is doing, or it's just providing us the same average for all the months, and it's doing the average only at the year level, we would like to extend this filter context to the every month in that particular duration, or in that particular period that we specify. So, at a starting point, we will use the end of the current month, current period. So, whenever a month is being selected, we use as a reference date as the last date in the current period, and then we extend starting from the last date, we go back 12 months or whatever period that we require. Okay, I think now it's time to understand how is this rolling average being computed. Okay, so I'll just give you a little bit of math explanation, and then we'll go back to the calculation on how we can apply it in the DAX formula. So I will take a calculator here. So in this calculator, um, let me also apply that final result so that it's easier for us to compare if that value is correct, like our calculation is correct. Okay, so here this is the final end result that we are aiming at. So this is the rolling average, right? So how are we getting this rolling average figures for every month, so that we will evaluate by using a calculator. Okay, so for the first month in Jan, the value is the same. Like if you see, the same value has been shown up because it didn't have the um, prior dates, and therefore it has just considered the value that is existing for that current month. But for the next month onwards, it has tried to evaluate the average. Now, how did it evaluate the average? Simple. So it will just add up Jan month sales to that of the Feb month sales and does an average to it. So let me try to calculate it. So 794,248.24 plus 891,135.91, which is the total of Jan and Feb month sales amount divided by 2. Why am I dividing it by 2? Because the formula for average is sum of number of records by total number of records. So here the sum of records is nothing but sum of Jan and Feb month sales amount divided by how many months are there being computed based on 2 months, Jan and Feb. So therefore I am dividing it by 2 value. Now if I enter, this is the average of February month, which is 842,692.08. Okay, so similarly, as you progress in the month's duration, the average would be computed accordingly. So in order to compute for March, that would be sum of Jan month, Feb and March month sales amount together divided by 3. And likewise it would progress until December, and once the 12 month duration has been computed, then at the 13th month it will do the rolling average, which is nothing but the total sales amount for that previous 12 months divided by 12, because then the number of months would be 12, right? So that is how the value is shown up for that particular Jan month. Okay, so this is how the rolling average is being computed mathematically. Now let's try to come back to Power BI and see how we can apply this in a DAX function. So I will try to open this sales average, and what we'll try to do here is, sorry. So what we'll try to do here is, let's try to update this particular calculation to have a possibility to extend this average over a given period. Okay, so in order to do that, let's try to update this to, so I'm using a variable because variables can be reused, and it would help us with the readability and increases the readability and also the reusability within the calculation. So therefore I'm using the variable expressions. So I'm saying variable, and the period, because we need to specify where this average has to be extended, right? So I'm creating this expression within the variable period by using the function dates and period, like I said, where we would like to apply this on the date. Okay, so this is my date, and what is my start date to it? So the start date for this period should be the last current date, correct? So again, I think let's try to create this. So last current date is nothing but the max of the date. Um, this one, okay, and then what is my interval or number of the period that we would like to evaluate here for the last 12 months, right? So rolling average on 12 months. So therefore I'm giving that number as minus 12. Now why did I give this as minus 12? Because we are looking at the values which are preceding, which are before this current date, and it's not the after the like, so let's say that if I'm at the month August, I would have to look back to the previous 12 months, and then I have to get that average value being computed. So therefore it is minus 12 because I'm looking at the previous values. And then comma, based on what interval or based on which particular interval it has to be computed based on the month period. Okay, so this is my calculation that I would like to apply in order to extend this filter context over the month wise to calculate the average. But if you see in this expression, these are little, like it's not readable, and also the month, right? Maybe we would like to make that more dynamic in nature, like whenever we would like to pass in a different value, we can just make it flexible. So let me create another variable here. sorry, yeah. So which is nothing but variable number of months as 12. So here I'm passing that value as 12, and this variable I'm going to replace here in my dates and period function. Okay, so now that it will be easier for me to read and understand. And then I also wanted to replace this particular expression here. So for that, I'm creating another variable called last current date, which is nothing but my max of the date. Okay, and here I'll just remove and replace that by this particular variable. Okay, okay. So until now, what we've tried to define, so we've defined how many months interval that we'd like to calculate as rolling average, which is given as 12 by using a variable. And we've also tried to look at how do we get the last current date by using this max function. And we've passed those two variables within my dates and period function. Now the next part here is that I would like to apply this particular average or extend this average being applied on a monthly basis. So therefore I'm going to evaluate this by using the variable and storing that in the result value by extending this expression to evaluate to month level. So I'm using this calculate function, and let me okay, so that it's more readable. Okay, now let me update this particular calculation here. So I've used a calculate function, and within that I'm trying to evaluate the average on my, let's keep this in uppercase to make it uniform. Okay, now on my calendar year month number based on my sales amount, and we would also need to specify that particular duration, right? Remember, how are we trying to calculate the rolling average? Let's say that I'm in Jan month, or maybe in May 2007. In order to calculate that particular month average, rolling average, we would have to look back the previous month, like a previous 12 months data, and get the average. For since here it is like the month is May, I have to get the average of, or get the total sum of sales amount until that May, and get the average to it. So therefore here I would need to pass the value as period, because we've already specified it in the above, right? So where period is nothing but based on my dates and period, we are getting that expression. Okay, so I'm just inserting based on this particular period. So in a simpler way, maybe period can be referred to as the window within which that average has to be calculated. Okay, so I will show that in the table once we complete this expression. Okay, so I'm passing this period and closing my expression here. Okay, so if we wanted to look at this particular result, I can use return statement and use this period, or maybe the result. Okay, let's see what does it return then. So I'm going to apply this, and let's see what is my output here. And okay, so now if you see, it's already trying to calculate the average. Okay, so 842,692.08. So it has returned the value as is. So we are getting this rolling average for that 12-month period as expected. But if you notice here, for 2010, though we didn't have monthly data for those durations for that particular months, the sales amount is still being displayed based on my rolling 12-month calculation that we had applied. But we do not want to display the data when there are no records, or when there is no data for that particular month duration. So how can we remove or exclude that particular period, right? So let us go back to the calculation and help us remove that particular uh, period. Okay, so in order to remove that, we can simply say that return, we can use an if statement stating that if sales amount is greater than 0, then display the result. So I can simply add this condition. And now if I come back to my table here and scroll down, I do not see that 2010 year wise year data being displayed, because it has excluded that particular duration since it did not have any data for those months in that given year. So this is working fine, but I would like to optimize this particular expression, because in that particular calculation which we've used this if statement, right, by using the sales amount comparison. So basically what it's trying to do is it's trying to scan the entire table every time to evaluate if that amount is above 0, where if that sales amount is existing for every row in the entire table. So which means that the performance is not so good in this particular situation. So how do we optimize this particular calculation in order to have the same expected result being showcased? So let's try to update this particular logic in a much better way. So I'll just remove this part, or maybe let's keep it. But here, instead of having or comparing with the sales amount, let's try to get the filter context that contains the last visible date. Okay, so for that I'll try to create another variable, which is my first first date and period. So first date and period is nothing but, we are trying, like I said, we are going to define that interval, right? Like from which month to which month. So what is that period within which this has to be calculated? So the first date and period is nothing but the min x of period based on my date. Okay, and then we also need to calculate the last date with sales, because we are trying to compare it, right? If that row has a sales amount or not. If it doesn't have a sales amount, then we don't want to calculate this average and being displayed in the output. So therefore the last date with sales can be validated by using this max of sales from my order date. Okay, now we can update this particular expression to consider first date in period, okay, which is less than or equal to last date with sales. Okay, now let's try to apply this and come back to our table. Okay, so now if I just scroll down, okay, so the function or the calculation that we have updated is seems to be working fine, because we do not see that 2010 year sales data being updated here, right? So which means that our expression is working fine without any errors. So this is how we are able to calculate the rolling average for 12 months duration based on my sales amount measure value. Okay, so in order to recap, like how we've tried to compute this particular expression, let me give you a quick recap on what we have tried to achieve. So, like I said, a rolling average is nothing but it's a calculation based on previous month's data. Like since the if I say like okay, I would like to calculate the rolling average on my 12 months period or the 12 months interval, then I would have to specify the range, right? So first I have to get that block of dates within which that rolling average is being computed. So that block is nothing but based on the 12-month interval. So let's say that from Jan to December, these are 12 months, so within this it is like one block. And if the current date is at Feb, then it would have to calculate the prior 12 months, so until Feb. So that is how it has been calculated, right? So maybe if I'm in October, then it has to look back for 12 months and get the total average of that particular 12-month interval. So that is nothing but the moving average. So here, what are my requirements? We would have to first evaluate the average, and this average has to be extended to be calculated at a monthly level. And we also need to specify what is my interval, like what is my block within which this rolling average has to be computed for that 12-month interval, right? So for that, we have applied this first date and period and last date with sales to optimize the scanning to eradicate if there are no sales amount for that current row. And also we've used a function called dates and period. So dates and period would help us to extend the filter context to include a longer period, and that would return a set of dates within a given period, so that we need to so that we can be able to specify the reference date and the starting point of the period along with the duration of the period. Okay, so in this particular calculation, we've used this period to calculate the dates and period, which is trying to extend the filter context to apply it every month and within that particular intervals, where we have passed based on my date, what is my last current date, and until which period, or until how many months we would like to calculate that average, so that we are parsing it through a variable called number of months. So here you can just update it to 12 or 3 or 6 or 9, whatever the value that you are looking at. You can just simply update this value so that the rolling average is being computed at that particular duration, and the interval is month. Because we are calculating the rolling average on 12 months period, the interval I have specified it to be as a month. Okay, and I am storing this result or extending that average by storing that in a variable called result, where I've used a function called calculate on top of my average x. So average x is an iterator which is applied on the table across the table values, and here we are passing it by the calendar year month number and the sales amount, where we are including or defining based on my period we would like to apply this particular average. Okay, so that block of period within which the average should be computed on a monthly basis, we are specifying it within this chunk of code. Okay, and then here we just try to optimize it. This is not mandatory to use, but however, since I wanted to optimize the calculation that we've applied here, I've used this with this variables. If not, then you can simply say if sales amount is greater than 0, then display the result. So result is nothing but my this value. So I hope this video was helpful to you to understand how we can calculate the rolling average of 12 months period in an easier and effective way. So if you do like this video, please do like, share and subscribe, and please do not forget to leave a comment in the comment section. Thank you.